Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, it finally happened. Alex DeBrincat has been traded to the Detroit Red Wings.
And 2 picks and 2 players come back in the deal to Ottawa, but was it enough?
We'll look at this trade from every angle, including the extension that Alex DeBrincat signed in Motor City and what kind of cap space are the Sens working with to continue to improve their roster. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 838 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Please like and subscribe wherever you download your podcast. We're also free and available on YouTube. Today's comment, it's an easy one. Leave a comment below. Help grow the show. What do you think of the trade? If you're living under a rock and we aren't exactly your first listen of the day, Pilsy, why don't you break down what Ottawa received in exchange for Alex DeBrincat?
Well, Ross, I want to start off with just saying, no matter how people feel about this trade, who wins, who loses, whatever, I'm just glad it's over and we can move on. And now we don't have to talk about Alex DeBrincat updates anymore. So here's how it goes. The Detroit Red Wings receive Alex DeBrincat with a 4-year, $7.85 million extension. The Ottawa Senators receive Dominik Kubalik, Donovan Sebrango, a conditional 2024 first-round pick, and a 4th-round pick.
So, of course, the NHL body coming back is Dominik Kubalik. We'll break down the Sens side of the return coming up a little bit later, but let's start with Alex DeBrincat. Played 82 games for the Ottawa Senators, had 27 goals, although just 12 of them came at 5-on-5. Disappointing? Do you regret taking that swing at the draft last year, or do you think that the experiment was worth it despite it going about as bad as humanly possible? What? Wow. They missed the playoffs. He had the worst year of his career, and then he leaves.
Yeah, no, it's not great. It's not great. But to answer your question, you know what? I think anytime you have the opportunity to acquire a 40-goal scorer in their prime as an RFA, I think in like hindsight's 2020, obviously, but I still think it was worth the gamble because you thought you'd get a better season out of Talbot. You didn't think that Josh Norris was going to go down that quickly. You didn't think you're going to have to use 7 different goalies. Who knows what could have happened, right? So to answer your question, obviously I could sit here and say that was the worst trade ever. They shouldn't have done that. But I think you got to take risks sometimes, and Pierre Dorion took a risk, and I respect that. But, Ross, the question I have here is, what was Dorion's plan? Because let's say it didn't go, what was the exact quote you use? As bad as humanly possible?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say it didn't go as bad as humanly possible. Let's say conservatively, Alex DeBrincat hits the 40-goal plateau like everyone thought he was going to. He's done that many times.
He almost hit the 40 post plateau this year.
Oh my God. Yeah. And let's just throw in 30 assists for the mix. So let's say you get 70 points, but it's 40 goals. You're not getting Alex DeBrincat at 7.85 on any AAV if he hits 40 goals again. So the Senators were barely able to afford him like this. Now they did add Chikrin, but they switched it with Zaitsev's contract. So it's not really an addition there. Korpisalo, you're only adding a little bit onto what Talbot was making, so that's not a big bump there either. So what was Dorion's plan? Like, how was he going to re-sign this guy anyways? We knew about the $9 million qualifying offer. So that's where I'm sitting, Ross, not in regret of the trade, more just shaking my head like, where was this supposed to go?
Well, what I'll say is I'm not sure if Claude Giroux signs unless they make that move for a top 6 forward, right? Giroux said that it caught his attention when Alex DeBrincat was traded to Ottawa.
But he also had the caveat that they need to add a top 4D. Remember, Dorion said that when he was bringing Giroux in, that's what he said. So you can't really do both, probably.
Yeah, well, with Alex DeBrincat, he gets to go home, but a part of this trade is another homecoming. But again, we'll stick to that. DeBrincat, though, did sign a 4-year extension at $7.85 million. Pilsy, you've been preaching short-term all along. He ends up signing a 4-year contract, and right away, before I even knew the return, I said, that's a contract I would have liked to have seen on Ottawa. I think at that price, Alex DeBrincat is certainly a valuable commodity, and that's why I was almost a little surprised that the value may not have jumped off the page. Again, we'll get to it, but I don't think it jumps off the page as a big home run by any stretch. But I also laugh at people who are saying there's nothing coming back because, I mean, Kubalik is a goal scorer himself, not to the same extent, but point per goal, cost per point. Is that the old Eugene Melnick saying?
Yeah.
He's a pretty productive player.
Yeah, let's stick with DeBrincat here, though. So, look, I agree with you. I think that's a good deal. And, not an absolute long-term deal. Who would have thought? Like you mentioned, that's what I've been saying all along. It's what makes sense for the team. It's what makes sense for Alex DeBrincat. Now, when you say you would have liked to have Alex DeBrincat stay on that contract, yeah, sure, in an open cap world and in a situation where the Sens can afford that. I agree, 100%. That is a great value contract. And you're betting on DeBrincat not to have a down year, and a down year for DeBrincat was 27 goals, 66 points. So that's a great bet for Steve Yzerman and the Detroit Red Wings. They can afford that. The Ottawa Senators are not in a position where they can afford that with how their cap is right now. Sure, the cap's going up, but you're giving a lot of that money to Jake Sanderson, and sure, you're going to have a bunch of dead money come off the books next year, but you're giving a lot of that money just to keep other guys back in the fold as well. So I just don't think that this was ever going to work. Alex DeBrincat being here more than 1 year or 1 year plus just sign whatever RFA deal he has and let him walk after or trade him at the deadline. It just wasn't going to work. So I'm of the mind, Ross, that this trade, it's not so much what you get in return for Alex DeBrincat, but it's what it allows you to do within the cap space you have available now that makes it work and makes sense for the Ottawa Senators.
Well, at the end of today's show, we're going to look at the Sens cap situation now that Dominik Kubalik and his $2.5 million for the rest of this season are on the books. The Sens with $5 million and change left on the salary cap with still Igor Sokolov and Shane Pinto to sign before training camp. But, of course, this is Locked On Senators. We want to know more about the return. Before we get to that, though, Pilsy, Alex DeBrincat, good riddance. I'm not mad at him. You can't fault a guy for wanting to go home, but I sure as shit don't want to see a tribute video for him next year. Like, come on, we got to draw the line somewhere.
There's going to be one. I can tell you that. Yeah, there will be.
Actually can't be.
I think there will be.
I don't. I think that it would be a joke if there is.
Get the poll up on Twitter. Wait. But here's the question. Will or should? What wording are you going to use? Because there's a big difference.
Will.
Okay.
Maybe he'll get like a little graphic.
No.
Get a graphic. Welcome back, Alex DeBrincat.
I bet it's a video. It's all there.
With what?
You're just handing out videos these days.
With what? Him in training camp skating beside Giroux and Stützle? Fine. We're going to get this line. It's going to be so great. They're going to be the best line.
I'm not saying I like it or agree with it, Ross. I can see it happening because I do think that among the players in the locker room that he's leaving on, I don't want to say good terms, but I don't think there's any animosity between him and the rest of the team.
He doesn't owe the Senators anything. He wanted to stay in Chicago.
Exactly.
He was traded to Ottawa. He never said he was going to 100% stay. You can't hold that against him. But hockey and sports are irrational. And that means a lot of people are going to blame him. But I'm not blaming him. I'm just slamming the door as he walks out. Like I'm done. It was 2 games.
Yeah, I'm Ross. I'm saying buy Alex DeBrincat. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. That's where I'm at. Yeah.
But then when I can see he's down the street, I open the door and we welcome in Dominik Kubalik, Donovan Sebrango, a first-round pick in this upcoming draft, and a fourth-round pick as well. We'll get into who they are, how they can affect the lineup, and are the Sens in a good spot without the Cat? That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And Ross, it's probably not up yet, but I can't wait to take a look at some future bets. The Ottawa Senators over under points, Detroit Red Wings over under season points, who will make the playoffs. You can bet. All of those are going to be options on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And you know the app is the best because it's simple, safe, secure, and easy to use. It's the app that I love the best. But for now, you can bet on baseball, and you can take your first swing on baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. So math guy, if you bet $20, you can get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And you get those green numbers, you get paid instantly. That's what you love to see. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Farm to Fork Delivery. Go to farm2forkdelivery.ca today and taste the Farm to Fork difference. When you go there, use promo code SENS10 for 10% off your first order. Load up, because there's no worse feeling than wanting to invite a friend back over if you're out on the golf course and you're like, hey, I'm not ready for the vibes to end. Come on over. Let's have a pint. Let's barbecue. But you're like, man, we got to go to the grocery store. No, at Farm to Fork, you can always be ready. Pull out one individually vacuum packed, what you think you'll need that day. And then you can just say, hey, fellas, it's all good. Come on over. We can have a barbecue at my place. That's the Farm to Fork way. And it is the no hormone, no additives. It is all fresh, frozen at the butcher's table, vacuum sealed. So it's super fresh, right closed in, and you have to try it. And man, their rate of return is unreal. First-time customers get 10% off, and you will go back because Farm to Fork Delivery is not grocery store meats. It is the only meat. Pilsy, we were eating that chicken last week, had some nice mango salsa on there. Oh, the versatility at Farm to Fork is unreal. You can go see all the deals at their website, farmtoforkdelivery.ca. Premium meats from local farms delivered directly to your door. How about the summer steak bundle? 10 filet mignons, 10 strip loins, 10 sirloins. That's 30 steaks for $10 a steak, plus Sens 10 gets you 10% off. So go visit farmtoforkdelivery.ca and taste the Farm to Fork difference. You will never go back to grocery store meats. All right, Pilsy. We had to get the DeBrincat stuff out of the way. Enough. Are we going to start roofing on the show now that our meow era is behind us?
Yeah, the meow era is gone. It was fun while it lasted, but
it was always lame.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I just say now. I'm just trying to get it out of my system. But let's meet the newest Senators, okay?
Let's do it.
And I think most importantly is Dominik Kubalik, right? Okay, here's a good question to start it. So we know it's Kubalik, Donovan Sebrango, a 21-year-old defenseman, Ottawa boy. So I mentioned DeBrincat's going home, but we just saw Kim Sebrango, Donovan's mom, just tweeted out saying he's coming home. So what a cool moment for the family. Mentioned the first-round pick and the fourth-round pick, and we'll get to the conditions on the first-round pick in just a moment. Pilsy, what has more value in this trade? The first-round pick with conditions or Dominik Kubalik, a 27-year-old goal scorer?
That's a good question, Ross. I'm going to go with the first-round pick, though, just because the Ottawa Senators can use that as leverage, and Dominik Kubalik only has 1 year left at $2.5 million. But that's not to downplay how good of a player is or what I think he can bring and what I think his impact could be on this roster.
Yeah, I think so, too. And why don't we take a peek at Kubalik's last season, though? Because we can't talk about a draft pick that doesn't exist, but we can talk about Dominik Kubalik. 81 games out of 82, 20 goals, 25 assists, good for 45 points. The shot share, the goal share, well below 50%, 46.1 expected goals percentage, 45.9 Corsi percentage, and averaged just a shade under 15 minutes a game. But Pilsy, the Detroit Red Wings, we saw it firsthand in February at the end of the month. It was a soft team. It was a bad team. So I'm not going to put it all on him because this guy showed his rookie season in Chicago that he can put up goals at a friggin' unreal pace.
Yeah, and honestly, Ross, he's been pretty consistent with the goal scoring. Like you mentioned, his rookie season, 30 goals in 68 games is pretty solid. And then the 2020-2021 season, only 56 games, obviously shortened season, and 38 points in your sophomore. So I wouldn't call that a sophomore slump. That's still pretty good point per game pace. And then 2021-2022 Chicago Blackhawks, 32 points in 78 games, but like that's a bad team you're on there, so I don't blame him too much there. And then he starts off in Detroit with 45 points in 81 games, and as you mentioned on Twitter, Ross, had a kick-ass world championship with 12 points in 8 games. So this is a guy that consistently is able to put up solid numbers. And we talked about this over and over again, Ross. The Ottawa Senators didn't need a top-line winger. They didn't need a top 6 winger, even in my opinion. They needed a guy that could be solid on a second line, and I really think that Kubalik can do that. And from what I'm seeing, for the most part, he spent most of his time last season on the top line with Larkin and Perron, or Larkin and Raymond, and he was able to find success there. So I'm really excited to see what I think he will be on the second line left winger, basically just replacing Alistair DeBrincat, but playing with Josh Norris as the centerman. Let's hope that health stays good. And Drake Batherson. So I think this is the right type of player to fit into that spot. And I'm confident that this is going to work out.
6'2", 190 pounds. He's in the final year of a contract that's paying him $2.5 million against the cap. He's a shoot first player, but Pilsy, you noticed in particular, the puck's on his stick and off his stick pretty quickly on his goals.
Yeah, Steve Warren, our friend of the show, posted a highlight pack of Kubalik, a 16-minute highlight pack. So if you guys are looking to catch up on him and see everything that he did in last season, I would highly recommend it. But a lot of those goals, a bunch of them on the power play on the right side, quick one-timer, bang, bang plays. But what I also noticed, Ross, is this is a guy that plays with some physicality, certainly more than Alex DeBrincat, and he's got better size than DeBrincat, 6'2", 190 pounds. So I think he's going to fit on the line with Batherson nicely. Those are two similar sized guys. And he's also able to set guys up as well. Now, not saying DeBrincat wasn't. DeBrincat showed a lot of good playmaking abilities last year. But I think, look, I'm not about to sit here and say Kubalik is a better player than Alex DeBrincat. Certainly that is not the case. The Red Wings got the best player in this trade with an extension. Credit to them. But Kubalik, I really do think, is going to fit in here. And I think, Ross, hopefully they can get him to an extension, and he'll be a puzzle piece that makes more sense in this whole equation rather than DeBrincat did here.
Yeah, and I hope they can lock him up, maybe a 2, 3, 4 year deal. Pills, yeah. You want to play a fun game? Name a Czech senator, because I feel like it's been a while. The Sens used to always have Czech players like Radek Bonk.
I was gonna say Bonk was my first one.
You got one? If I say Bonk, you got one right away?
No.
Or punching the
stick. Chara.
No, Slovak.
Oh, Slovak. Hossa.
I'm trying to put it right in your lap.
Oh, Hasek. Oh, man, Hasek, yes.
I mean, there you go. Martin Havlat, another one right there. Vaclav Varada, remember him? Hey, Karl Rakunik, rest in peace, but he was another one as well, a good Czech senator. They used to always have a few on the team. They had the Slovaks as well. You mentioned Chara, Hossa as well when it comes to that, but I think obviously that's far down the list of why it matters. But for Dominik Kubalik, I do think he could find a home here. And I think that if he can look at maybe improving the playmaking a little bit, he could take another step. And I think if you're playing with Norris as your centerman, you're going to want to be able to find him in open spots, because that give and go, get a multiple one-timer threats on the same line. I think it could be a really good thing. And again,
Ross, he did have the most assists of his career, though, with 25. So the playmaking is getting better.
Okay, so we like to see that. Honestly, I see a bit of similarity between Larkin and Norris too, right? With the speed down the middle. Norris is probably the best pure athlete up front. Maybe Brady's got something to say about that, but I think Norris is right up there. And it's a shame that he missed so much last year, because I even saw some people from Sabres Twitter and whatever dunking on Norris, being like, how did he get that contract? And I know it was big and they were betting on the future, but I feel like this guy's going to surprise some people next year if he can stay healthy and really supplant himself as a 40-goal scorer in this league. So I'm excited for Josh Norris next year. I think Dominik Kubalik is going to be a real nice complimentary player. And at $2.5 million, like there's not a whole lot of risk there. It's just how much value did the Senators get back in that trade. Now, Pilsy, this is where we have to put on our GM, our cap-friendly hats, because there's a couple of conditions with the pick. And it's actually something I'm a little upset about, because the Senators don't get to know whose pick this is until after the season. So what? We're preying on both Detroit and Boston's downfall? I need to know who
I'm okay with that
this year. I mean, they're both divisional teams.
Yeah.
So you're cheering for them to lose most times than not. But like with San Jose, it was such a concerted effort. We put all our energy behind cheering for whoever San Jose played. But Detroit gets to pick which first-round pick between them and the Bruins they send to Ottawa.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part of this condition. And so I'm going to pull it up here because it's one of those where...
Well, I don't even think it's a huge deal beyond that, because the rest of the condition means that the Bruins draft top 10. Like, I know We've been saying they're falling off forever, but like the Bruins aren't drafting top 10 next year.
Hey, this has gone sideways more times than it hasn't, Ross. When you talk about top 10 protected, and it's always involved Ottawa and Boston. Like the Bruins with isn't that how they got Tyler Seguin second overall with because the Leafs?
That was with Phil Kessel.
Yeah. But there was a protected.
And then they got 9th overall as well. It was Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton for Phil Kessel.
And then you look at the Duchesne trade. Then you look at the Carlson trade. Like, this does happen. So,
right. But when you have this gives Detroit like 2 chances at that, right?
But here's the condition, just in case people haven't seen it. So, condition: Detroit has the option to send their own or Boston's 2024 first-round pick. In the event the Bruins' 2024 first-round pick is a selection in the top 10, then Boston can retain it because they've got a top 10 protected. But then they transfer their 2025 first-round pick unprotected. Then Detroit has an opportunity to say, hey, we want to keep the 2025 Boston unprotected or send our own 2024 first over. So it's definitely a weird one, and the Sens are kind of just waiting to see what the other two teams are going to decide, and then whichever falls in the lap falls in the lap. But I don't anticipate the Ottawa Senators are looking at this pick as a prospect they're going to select anyways, Ross. I feel like this is either going to be a piece to bring in another player or have some sort of rental come in at the trade deadline. So both of those are bringing in a player, right? So I think it's going to be interesting here, but I do think that pick holds more value than Kubalik just because of the flexibility it gives you and the possibility that it could be a decently high pick depending on how Detroit and or Boston do.
Before we look at how this affects the Senators' current situation with the cap and with Shane Pinto and Igor Sokolov still yet to sign, Pilsy, Donovan Sebrango. A lot of people just see him as a throw-in, but I have multiple Detroit Red Wings fans reach out to me and say, look, Seaman Edvinsson played ECHL a little bit. Like, they use their ECHL team as a legit prospect developing area. Donovan Sebrango is 21 years old, and I think he got hosed, like many did in his draft year, by the OHL completely shutting down. He had to turn pro at 19 years old, went over and played in Slovakia for a brief stint, and then came back. And so he was in his second pro year and was on the World Junior team.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like, it's such a strange dynamic. He seems like a very mature kid from everything I've read about him. There's an amazing feature in The Athletic about him. Guess who his idol was growing up, Pilsy? Might shock you.
Erik Karlsson.
So, defenseman from Ottawa. Yeah, you really had to go out on a limb there.
I got it.
He trained with Pat Malloy, who we talked about. He trains Mason McTavish, Claude Giroux, all these guys, a personal skills coach. So, Sebrango is going to be closer to home. I really like the fit. Sebrango is a 2020 draft pick. He was the first pick in the 3rd round. So he was actually, I think, then 2 picks ahead of Marilainen, or like right in that same. So the Sens, again, just dominating the 2020 draft, like they needed another reason. But no, all jokes aside, Sebrango is more of a defense-first defenseman who will focus on being feisty. He's not afraid to mix it up in the corner, left shot, but can play either side, but can move the puck enough that he's not going to be a liability getting into his own, out of his own zone either.
I see Sebrango as Clevin competition, Ross. That's kind of where I have him pegged. Like, both of those guys likely are going to be in the AHL, but they're both going to be pushing to be the first one that gets that opportunity to play bottom left pair.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think more so for me, it would be like that next. And I know that he was the same draft as Clevin, but I just see Clevin as more mature, more physical, and obviously a bigger body.
I mean, Sebrango has a lot more pro experience.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. He does have that going for him. So, no, I'm just interested to see how he fits in at training camp. And like, what does this do for the Senators decor as a whole? Because we had just mentioned how we felt like it was pretty set.
Yeah, Ross, I really see the writing on the wall, and I think Eric Branson will be moved. Not this season, but eventually. I do think that will happen, and I think because he's not going to be able to fit in here pretty soon as well, and I think teams are going to have value for him. And that $2 million cap hit, sure, it doesn't seem like much, but that's likely going to go up next year, and I think they're going to have to find ways to squeeze other guys in. They're going to need an entry-level guy to come in and play on that bottom pair, and I think Clevin or Sebrango could be that one of those guys. So I really think too, Ross, you look at this, like, Belleville is looking like a very, we don't have to dive too deep into this, but that's another great addition for Belleville.
Kind of cool story about Donovan Sebrango. We talked about how he's from Ottawa. He's a world junior gold medalist, all these great things, but kind of cool. He's got a Cuban background. His dad was a professional soccer player with the Cuban national team as well. Eduardo Sebrango played a little bit in the MLS or the NASL with Montreal Impact as well earlier on. So kind of cool. He was a forward, rather. I don't know if I said goalie there, but yeah, he's a pro soccer player for his dad. So Sebrango definitely got the athletic genes in his family.
He'll be good at keep up before the game, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, he's probably great at Super Bowl. And he also played 4 games, funny enough, for the Ottawa Junior Senators. So not the first time that Sebrango will be playing with the Senators. But who else is going to play for the Senators? Is Pierre Dorion done? Let's get to that. You're listening to Locked On Senators. All right, Pillsy. Reminder, everyone can follow the show on Instagram, lockedon.senators, and on Twitter at Sens Central. We've discussed the trade, but we haven't asked you point blank, Pillsy, did Ottawa get enough value for Alex DeBrincat based on the circumstances that they found themselves in?
I think the last part of your statement there is the key thing. So based on the circumstances they were in, I do think they got enough here. Now, I think it's interesting when you start looking at this, Ross, as a 3-team trade. And I forget which Twitter account did this, but they set it up as if it was a 3-team trade. So Chicago receives Kurchinski, Paul Ludwinski, and a 3rd-round pick, right? That's what they got from Ottawa. Detroit receives DeBrincat, 4-year extension. Ottawa gets 1 year of DeBrincat, Dominik Kubalik, a conditional 2024 first, a 4th-round pick, and Donovan Sebrango. So when you start looking at like that, it eases your mind a little bit more. So I will say, you know what? They did get enough. Did they win this trade? No, I don't think they won this trade. I think if you're a Detroit Red Wings fan, you're looking at this being like, we gave up Kubalik, a guy that had 1 year left, and we upgraded scoring. DeBrincat is arguably a much better scorer than Kubalik, and he's younger, and he's extended. And you gave up a 1st-round pick. You had 2 of them anyways. That's fine. You gave up a prospect in Sebrango that not only could you afford to lose, Ross, but you kind of had to move him. They got way too much depth on defense. He wasn't going to move up past those other guys, and then a 4th-round pick. So I think overall, each team here can kind of look at the final results of the DeBrincat trade and be like, you know what? We got what we needed here.
Do you think another move is coming for the Ottawa Senators as they sit right now with $5 million in cap and just one NHL player to pay more than league minimum at NHL level?
Well, the next move is going to be Pinto's contract. I feel pretty confident in that. Unfortunately,
Wait, you don't think it's going to be Vladimir Tarasenko out of the clouds tomorrow? Because I'm even connecting the dots at this point because like how and why. Anyways, I know he changed agents, but I'm putting my tinfoil hat on for this, Pilsy.
okay, go ahead.
No, I just think Vladimir Tarasenko is somehow going to be an Ottawa Senator.
At how much? What dollar amount?
I have no idea. I can't even play the guessing game because any number I say, I'm going to have to put the caveat that it's probably more than the $5 million they have left.
Exactly. And Pinto is not signed. So unfortunately, Ross, I think this finishes things off for the Sens. Let's say conservatively give Pinto $3 million. I'm not sure.
I don't think that's conservative. I think that's, if we're conservative, I'd say 1.8.
Well, no, I'm saying like to be generous, like to just say like top amount you're going to give him. So conservative as in the fact of cap space left,
right?
Is more what I'm going for. Yeah, I'm not saying 3 million is the floor for Pinto. That's not how I was putting that. So let's say right away you take 3 mil off for Pinto, right?
Yep.
You got 2 mil left, and
this is what I wanted to put up for anyone watching on YouTube. By the way, I've put in Ridley Gregg at left wing on the third line. I'm convinced that's his spot to lose.
Yeah. So I don't think you don't have money for Tarasenko. You don't have money for Tatar. You can't bring in some guy like that. The only way I see something happening, Ross, is if the Senators decide to package that first round with Joseph or with Brandstrom and bring someone in. That's the only way I see that happening.
Wow. That's interesting. So you think there's a chance that the Senators trade this first round pick that they just acquired?
I do think there's a chance. Yeah. The pick they acquired means they will be trading one of their first round picks, whether it's their own or the one they just acquired. One of those picks is moving. I almost guarantee it. Now, whether it's now or at the deadline, I'm not sure, but the Senators will not be making a selection with the pick they just acquired unless they decide to keep that and trade their own. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. So looking at this lineup right now with $5 million left, like, are you confident in this group? Because I think there's a great mix of talent.
Yeah, I think people are down on this. And our buddy Laleem's Martian said the depth on this team without DeBrincat is underwhelming and terrible, and he doesn't think it's going to go well. I'm going to push back on Martian on that one because, look, the thing is, you can't just look at the forward depth. Sure, if you want to just look at the forward depth, maybe it's underwhelming, but you got to look at how the rest of the roster shakes out here. You added Chychrun. I think that's going to play such huge dividends, not only offensively, but defensively. That's like you're swapping Chychrun for Zaitsev. The upgrade on that is enormous. You're getting a Sanderson that's now has a full NHL season under his belt. You're getting a healthy Forsberg. You're getting a Korpisalo that's coming off a fresh, big contract signed, and I think that he's going to make a good 1A goalie. And you're adding a Tim Stützle that's another year older. Like, I just think that you
Josh
can't.
Norris
Yeah, man, that's the big. I knew I was forgetting one. That's the big one there. Like, that's the one where, like, Josh Norris effectively for me replaces DeBrincat's goal scoring. I feel like that's a fair statement to say. And then you bring in Kubalik for depth and a guy that's going to play more physical. And I just think that this team is better than last year. I think I would have a hard time listening to an argument that it's not better. So I like where the Senators are at right now, Ross. And you know what? You need cap space. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what players are going to be available with retained salary at the deadline? I think the Ottawa Senators are in a better position now than they were if they would have signed DeBrincat.
All we heard last year, Pilsy, was the Sens have such an amazing top six. Sens have the best top six. Maybe we're the ones who are kind of saying that too. But everyone was kind of on board. They added DeBrincat. The top six is so unbelievable. But did they forget about defense? So now I think, if anything, they're more balanced. Are they?
Yes,
better?
That's what I'm saying.
we're going to have to wait till the puck drops in October to decide whether or not this is a better team, but it's certainly more balanced. And I think that it could pay dividends with or without another move. But Pilsy, I would like to see one more forward added, and I'd like it to be someone who can play all over the lineup. And I know we threw out kind of half jokingly Derek Brassard, but like that type of player where he has a bit of name cachet, he's a veteran, he's a presence in the locker room, that sort of thing. I think that would be a very good thing. But I also am not completely against having one open spot that's up for grabs in training camp for Yarventi or Sokolov to just absolutely grab. And if they can't, then it's Crookshank and the hardworking attitude that he's going to bring game in, game out. Then he should be in the mix for a bottom six role on this team. But the opportunities are endless. Heck, you could even have a world where if you want to spread out the scoring, Kubalik could play with Pinto on a third line, and then you have Ridley Gregg play on the second line where he played a lot last year when he filled in at center for Josh Norris, and we could really see a little more depth created that way. So yeah, I'd almost say there's more depth now than there was last year because Ridley Gregg's a year older and all those other guys that you mentioned. Drake Batherson, a full offseason of training without the high ankle sprain behind him, or with the high ankle sprain bothering him last summer. So I'm excited. I think that the Senators, I think that you look at it, you're like, I wish it was a better, like a more like A-level prospect in there, or Jonathan Berggren or anything like that. But the Senators kind of painted themselves into a corner. And I do have time for people who are like, hey, a lot of what Dorian's done is mopping up his own mistakes when it comes to giving away picks to get rid of Matt Murray, giving away picks to get rid of Nikita Zaitsev. Now painting himself where he could only really trade DeBrincat, where he wanted to sign an extension to get any value back. I have time for hearing that. It's fair criticism. But I also, we had Kubalik circled. Like, I think he's going to be a solid addition to this team. So I'm excited, man. I think internally the Sens are still in a much better spot than Detroit. Like, I'm not even, it's Buffalo that I'm more so worried about teams that are on the rise. Detroit's decor is a disaster.
Yeah, I think Detroit's closer than maybe Sens fans are putting out right now. And I think maybe that's a lot of, it's emotional because I do think they're going to get there. I think Detroit does have good depth, but I'm taking Ottawa's roster 7 days a week, absolutely, over Detroit's.
You know what actually makes me feel so much better about Korpisalo's contract? And I know there's more term. You know that Ville Husso is making $4.75 million?
Yeah.
Give me Korpisalo over Husso every day of the week.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think, like you mentioned, the decor.
Who's your backup? James Reimer?
Reimer, yeah. Although Reimer put up decent numbers for a crap San Jose team. So I think him as a backup or even a 1B could be decent. But again, I'll take Forsberg over Reimer in that role.
John Perlberg, and we mentioned this on Twitter. Shout out to Kadri Sens as well. DeBrincat had 12 even 5-on-5 goals. I got to make that clear because even strength would include overtime, which is 3-on-3, where you have more space, all that type of thing as well. 5-on-5 goals last season. Alex DeBrincat was 5th on the Sens with 12. Kubalik was tied for 2nd on the Wings with 12. So they had the exact same amount of goals. Kubalik, competitive, hard on the forecheck, and yeah, excited to see him in Ottawa. I think it's going to be a good fit for him, and I'm excited to see it, Pillsy. So next thing we really have to circle is what's going to happen with Shane Pinto. How long of a contract will the RFA get? When will Igor Sokolov get his fair paycheck in the AHL and get a two-way contract, or even that two-year deal where it's two-way in the first year, one-way in the second? That's what I would be pushing for. I think that makes sense both sides. And then, are the Senators going to make another move, or are they content? We'll have plenty of time to dissect that tomorrow on the show. We have Tyler Clevin, which we were going to put up today, but Pillsy, we had to get this one out as a full DeBrincat trade reaction video. So, any final thoughts, Pillsy? That one kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, a Sunday, I'm sitting down for dinner. Like, come on.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't ready for an Alex DeBrincat trade. I was enjoying my Sunday, let's just say that. So, but I'm happy that it happened, Ross, because now we can move forward. I really do think for Sens fans that are down on this trade and all gloom and doom right now, just take a look at the whole picture. Zoom out from the trade graphic and look at the roster, look at who's here now, look at the cap space available, look at what the Senators needed to do moving forward. And I think you'll be happy with the Josh Norris returning. That is the biggest thing of all that makes me okay with this. And I think go watch some Kubalik highlights. This is a good player. And if you talk to Red Wings fans, this is a guy that they liked. He was third on their team in scoring last year. Like, this is a solid player, and I think he fits perfectly into this system, and I hope that they can sign him to some sort of short-term extension, Ross, because I think he could be a guy that would be a really good third-line player. So overall, I'm disappointed in the way this was all kind of handled, but when I zoom out and think about it, the Sens are actually in a pretty good spot here, and I'm excited for next season to start, especially, Ross. Doesn't take too long for the Ottawa Senators to see the Detroit Red Wings in the schedule. I believe it's October 21st. So, that'll be interesting.
Alex DeBrincat's return to Ottawa. Not only are they playing Detroit, it is at the Canadian Tire Center, a 1 p.m. Eastern matinee. Maybe they'll have a cat nap over on the wing side, but it will be the 6th game of the season for the Ottawa Senators, and it will also be the 4th of a 5-game homestand for the Ottawa Senators. So very, very important start to the season for Ottawa.
And thank God it's not in Michigan. We know Alex DeBrincat loves to light it up when he's in Michigan or playing against the Red Wings. So that's a good one. And Ross, I was looking at Kubalik.
I was just going to say, we don't have our secret Michigan weapon, Austin Watson.
Yeah, for real. I was looking at Kubalik's game log on Elite Prospects, and he started off the season pretty hot. The first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, he had points in all of them except the very first game. So I think he's going to help this team start off hot, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this works out for both sides. We gotta get the Locked On Red Wings guys on the show to discuss this, because I'd be interested to see how they see all this.
Yeah, it should be noted the Sens have won 9 of their last 11 games against Detroit, including 6 of their last 7. So, who wants it is how today's show. For today, we say goodbye. Enjoy the early drop coming out tonight and Tuesday. Tyler Clevin Tuesday coming up tomorrow on Locked On Senators. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.